So I'll introduce Evie a little bit later, but we are talking about leading through uncertainty today. And we are 54. If you're new to this call and to these live learning events, it's so great that you've heard of us and that you're here today. So I'll just take a moment to tell you a little bit more about what 54 does. So our mission and what we strive to do is to guide leaders of nonprofits on your learning journey to reach your full potential. So what does that mean? That means that we've got a collection of resources that helps you to just reduce this complexity of strengthening the health of your organization, which we know is so real. It's probably one of the areas of fog that you might be experiencing at the moment. So we exist to help you with that and to meet that need. And we really love doing that. So please engage with us in any way that you find relevant. My name is Nina. I'm responsible for running these live learning events, and it's such a joy to be doing this. And I'm particularly excited today because I've got a co-host that you would most probably know, and his name is Neil. So thank you, Neil, for co-hosting with me today. It's so great to be doing this with you, especially because you're also a specialist on the topic of leadership. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Nina. It's actually great to be here. I had to kick Ian out. He's in the Czech Republic today. He would normally be co-hosting with you. And in fact, Ian is doing a session in Eastern Europe on 54 right now and on capacity and organizational health. So we're going to miss him, but it's my privilege and my advantage.
Thanks, Neil. That was a pretty big kick to get him all the way to the Czech Republic. Yes. So he's representing us there. Thanks, Neil. So as you know, this meeting will be recorded, and if you've missed it, well, obviously you don't if you're here, but if you know of someone who missed it, they don't need to worry. It will be on the site. And we always ask everyone to stay on mute to not disrupt the session. But if network allows it, we would really love to see your face. So then please switch on your camera. Very important, at the end of this session, we will have some time for questions. So we really want to encourage you to ask questions and engage. This is such a great opportunity to connect with someone who's really gone before us in delving into this topic really deeply. So if you have any questions, post it in the chat or write it down, because there will be time to engage with Evie at the end. In the meantime, we'll have breakout rooms where you can also engage with other leaders. So as I've mentioned, our presenter today is Evi Rodemann. She's the CEO of Lead Now and so passionate to help and strengthen leaders and to help them unlock their calling. So I'll introduce her in a moment when I hand over to her. But we've also got a course from her on the website. It's called Leading Through the Fog, same as today's topic. So if you want more, there's more for you to go grab on the platform after the session. Right, and as you know, the topic for today is in the dimension of leadership. And why this is important is if we look at this data, it's just one piece of a lot of data that points to the fact that the struggle is real to lead in times of uncertainty. And I'm sure that is why you are here today. So there was a study done by Barna Group at the end of this COVID wave where we all needed to learn new rhythms and ways of working with very strange challenges that we've never had to deal with before. And there was an astonishing increase in pastors who said that they've considered quitting full-time ministry. And that has increased from 29% to 42% from January 2021 to March 2022, which is a heartbreaking statistic. So yeah, Neil, what comes to mind when you see this?
Well, I think this is firstly just a snapshot. It's of pastors, but it certainly is going to be representative of leaders in various sectors all over the world today. And this was, as you mentioned, just after COVID, but this has actually just increased over the last couple of years, the uncertainty and the complexity of leadership. And if a leader is disheartened, if a leader is discouraged, the leadership dimension of these 9 dimensions is the one that has the greatest disproportionate impact on all of the other factors. And so a leader who's considering leaving or is struggling to be able to lead effectively affects the management team that's around them, and they in turn affect all of these dimensions. And so the whole organization really does begin to struggle to look inwards. And so this is a great topic for us today. And when we talk about organizations thriving, and we talk about, if leaders are thriving, then what happens is, and you guys, you may have seen this diagram that we've used, and this really makes a lot of sense for us, is the energy of the organization gets sucked inwards when an organization is unhealthy, when the leader is unfocused, when the management team is not where they should be, and instead takes a lot of the missional impetus away of the organization. But in a healthy organization, it really does project the energy outwards towards the mission. And I've said this several times, but we at Mergon and at 54 and all of the different specialists, we're not in love with organizational health by any means. We really are wanting to see God's kingdom come, and the way to do that is to have healthy organizations that project energy outwards towards impact. And so that's really what we love to see.
Thanks, Neil.
So we're going to look at a couple of slides here, and I want to just ask you again to jump onto AHA slides and let us know what your thoughts would be. But so this is Deloitte, from Deloitte's annual Human Capital Trend Report. And every year they rate the most important leadership skill in the sort of broader season of the world that we're in. So what would your thoughts be between these four options? The first being the ability to lead through more complexity and ambiguity. The second, the ability to lead through influence, which is a real hot leadership topic. The ability to manage on a remote basis, of course, because we've become much more remote in how we do business around the world. And fourthly, the ability to manage a workforce combination of humans and machines. And we talk about AI, and we talk about a whole bunch of things. But if you were having a thought there, it would be interesting to hear. We're asking them to. There we go. What would your thoughts be? I'd love to hear you guys before we give you the right answer. Let's just give it another couple of seconds. Come on, don't be shy. Yeah, workforce combination of humans and machines certainly is going to be one of the leading leadership skills that we're going to need in the next while. But if we had to be a spoiler here and tell you what the answer is, Nina, you could just do a reveal there. Yeah, it's certainly is the ability to lead through more complexity and more ambiguity. And this topic is spot on for us. One more slide before we jump in, but this is according to a recent study of over 13,000 leaders. And the question is, what percentage of the leaders surveyed said that their leaders were very capable of leading in a VUCA world? So somebody said 18%. Someone's on the 26 bandwagon here. Well, we're building nice and steadily. What are your thoughts, guys? Tell us what you think would be good here. I'm waiting for one or two more of you before I give the spoiler. Okay, so most of you are saying 42%. And the real answer is, in fact, 18%. So what leaders are saying is we have a low confidence, only 18% confidence that our leaders are very capable of leading in an uncertain world. So we assume that most of you, if not all of you who are on this call today, are leaders, and most likely you are leading in a complex environment. And our ability to lead through these requires us to draw on a whole new set of skills. And that's why I'm so pleased that Evi is with us to take us through this today.
Amazing. Thank you for leading us through that, Neil. You made it a lot less foggy. So we're very happy to introduce Evi today because, as you can see, this is a very important skill for the century. Not a lot of people feel that they're confident. Leaders feel that they're confident in leading through uncertainty. And so, Evi, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, for preparing so well, and for leading us through the fog today. I know you are also right there in the fog at the moment, and that kind of makes it better, although I'm really sorry about that. But it just tells us that it's real and it's okay to feel like that. So we're so grateful that you are here today. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Very appreciated. It's wonderful to see everyone here on the screen. I love to hear the South African accents. I'm not sure if we have any other accents here. Then please write it, but it's such an honor to be part of this. And personally, I'm just very passionate about the topic just because I care about leaders finishing well. This is really, I always think, things will happen in life, but I really care about us, finishing well. And so I always say, maybe this sounds very naive, but I always say, if you want to be loved as a leader, you rather go and sell ice cream, right? I've done that in Hamburg and I have made people very happy. But if you're as a leader, you have to make complicated and sometimes very hard decisions. And so part of leading is always there's some pain involved, some uncertainty. And so just as looking at the statistics, which Neil and Nina have just, highlighted, there is lots of uncertainty in leadership. So I want to thank you, everyone here on the screen today who's listening and joining in. Thank you for being willing to bear the costs in leadership. I don't mean it lightly. I feel honored, to be among leaders who are willing to prepare, bear the price and actually saying, I'm ready and I'm willing to, to really experience also pain, because some is just part of life. And so I always say, for me, leadership and pain, is like one coin with two sides. I think they belong together, sadly, but I do think that we can't separate, being in leadership and then at the same time, that some, there are costs involved. And so I'm going to dive straight into sharing something personal from me. And I always think, oh my goodness, I don't like looking at my own pain, but maybe it is helping us to understand and maybe identify and maybe, being more passionate and compassionate also with other leaders. But let me start with my personal story here. It was 8 years ago. I was serving as the CEO of a European youth organization. And I felt so called to it. I mean, I'd never imagined that in my life I would be actually asked to become the CEO of this newly founded organization. But I loved it with every cell in my being. I just loved it, seeing and engaging with thousands of young ones in Europe and bringing them together, and the energy and the impact and what is possible when you invest into a young generation was just the best thing in my life. And I knew there had been some tensions in the background with the advisory board, but I was like, when you work with the young generation and, you don't expect everyone to love it. So I didn't expect older leaders to always love our decisions and so on. But I thought, come on, this is for the young generation. And even just 6 months before that happened, I was just asked, could I consider, staying on for another 3 years? So I was like, yeah, I'm ready. This is the best thing in my life. And so I was ready to go and, ready to roll out these various European conferences. I had an incredible team. We have seen God at work. We have seen miracles, the way he provided finances and everything. And the organization grew. It was like, in 40, whatever, plus countries in Europe engaging. And then, the day X came. I put into my calendar. Well, that was the worst day in my life so far. It was absolutely dreadful. In a phone call I got that day, and luckily I had my mentor with me because I thought something is odd. But in that phone call, I was read a letter. And with that, it was an immediate termination of my role, my position, whatever. The organization. I had to leave the organization, this Christian mission ministry, and I was trying to check, what about the handover? Then I realized actually it wasn't desired. When I said, what about these hundreds, whatever, thousands of relationships in Europe? They said, we've got your database, so we don't need anything else from you. And I'm sure I've done lots of my mistakes in there. But the way it ended was so very painful. That was it, you know. I was out, and also then my core team was also asked to leave. And I'm sure some people on this, you know, call have experienced their own share of pain in leadership. And I cannot probably say I understand your pain, but we've all experienced our own pain. And maybe, I don't know how you identify with that, but I knew I was in pain because I had told you this was one of the best things ever to do in my life. And now it was taken away 1 minute to the other. I went through so much pain. I was crying my eyes out. I faced this loss and grief and self-doubt, you know, questioning if I ever wanted to work with Christians again. Maybe this is nothing you ever thought about, but I was like, oh my goodness. I was wondering, where is God in all of this? I was crying my eyes out. And so just thinking, you know, how is that working out in the world we live in? And let me just share my slides with you on this, so to walk this through and go on full mode here, so that you can also follow some of it here on the screen. So I was really in a miserable place, and have to be, you know, I'm sad to say, but it took me a year to recover well. It was so hard and so painful for me. I was in a real mess, and I have to say, God met me in this mess. I don't know if there's any mess you have experienced recently or in the past, but I was in a very mess, and I was in shambles, and I was like, I was wondering, will I ever leave this dark place again? Because I didn't know, is this a time which is going to end sometime or not? I was doubting, what kind of leader am I? You know, am I a good leader? You know, who would ever want to work with me again? And also then, you know, starting with my team, we felt very much in a fog. And out of this, a few years later, I also started my own organization, investing into young leaders, and was also very foggy. But it was there that God came in and he whispered. And so I'm praying that whatever you are facing also today, or you faced in the past, and there will be also challenges in the future, how will you hear God in a whisper? And so leading through that fog, for me, I was trying to discern, you know, what does it mean for me to lead through fog? It is thinking, you know, I'm from Hamburg, big harbor city, you know, I love the harbor, but, you know, is that to trying to steer a ship when you cannot really see what's ahead, and the conditions are, you know, shifting once in a while. You don't know if it's backwards or forwards, you know, and you feel that whatever decision you make is going to be dangerous. And as leaders, we have to make decisions, and they will be sometimes very humbling. You will never please everyone. One of my favorite authors said in his book, Leading with a Limp, Dan Allender, he said, as a leader, you need to be even willing to be hated. You know, and like, I don't want to be hated. I want to be selling ice cream and be in leadership. But it doesn't always work, maybe, with that chocolate thing. But anyway, but so is that kind of, you know, fog? Is there like kind of lack of certainty, you know, that maybe I'm doubting, you know, my capabilities, or, you know, leadership issues, and also maybe the environment is in a very trying situation. You know, we have so many challenges, and I think Neil just pointed it out with that VUCA world. You know, there are so many challenges ahead. How do we maneuver our organizations through? And so I remember, you know, being in that crisis, and one of the American leaders sat me down, and he asked me how I was doing. And he realized that, you know, I simply wanted to escape. So I would have really liked to put my number on, you know, maybe not fight, but flight, you know, in the sense of escaping as quickly as I can, because I didn't want to stay in that very uncomfortable place. But, and he, you know, I didn't want to know, you didn't know, will I go right or left, but straight? I mean, going ahead, I didn't think that was an option I really wanted. But, you know, he asked me this question, you know, will you follow God's leading also into the fog, into not knowing what awaits you, but trusting that God is right there? So that's a question I have for you. Where are you in the fog, maybe right now? I mean, something triggered you to come, maybe because you just love, you know, the 54 courses, but something made you come and say, what is that you think about? Thinking about the fog, and wondering if the sun is shining right now. And I hope for some of you it is. Or is it, is the water clear? Or, where do you place yourself? And so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. And we're going to go and ask you to place yourself on that whiteboard, if it's happening, and seeing, where can you place yourself in the fog. So you can actually, I don't know if you've done that before, but actually you can write on these whiteboards, and so you can actually put a mark here. So okay, so you can actually now, between 1 and 10, you can use a pen. If you click on the pen symbol and you say, how much do you feel leading through the fog right now? Exactly, that's super. Someone already started. Put a cross between 1 and 10. Where would you put that? How much, is it leading through the fog right now? I mean, it's anonymous, so don't worry about, giving your answer here. No one is gonna judge you whatsoever. So just looking at this here, there are more people on the higher end. Some are just in the middle. Someone, I think, put down even low and not a lot. So praise the Lord that we're not all on the same page, but, are in different situations and can, always think, lift each other up when we are in tough situations. So thank you very much for putting your line here, and just sort of that self-assessment and thinking like, okay, how does it work now? What can we do? Excellent. So let me just go back to my slides here. Thank you. So can you see my screen? Just want to make sure that it still works.
Not yet. I think you'll just have to share again.
Yes.
Thank
okay.
you, Evi. And thank you everyone for engaging with that whiteboard. It's good to just see where in the fog are we? Do you feel blinded? Do you feel like you're walking a clear path?
Yeah, very true, very true. Thank you. Okay, so then I thought, like, going, taking this into, there was a term I came across a few years ago, actually through my South African friends, and I totally fell in love with that, because I thought, like, often we are in that space in between, that things are not clear, and it's like, uncertainty. When will this end? And so maybe you've heard about this, but the liminality, I think, is such a great word, hard to pronounce, but it comes from the Latin word limen, and it means like a threshold or a space in between. And so it's something where in the liminal space, we also talk about the liminal space, when it arises, and it means that we left the old behind. It may be a ministry, I mean, there could be a relationship or organization, whatever. We left the old behind. We know we can't go back, but we don't know what's coming next. And so we stand at this, sorry, that was the wrong way. We stand, sorry, I missed this slide here. Anyway, my picture, I want to show you my picture. We missed that space, we're at this threshold of a door, and we know we have to go forward because that's the only option, but we don't know what comes next. And so I wondered, about people who have experienced leading through the fog. And so I think this is how, like, over the last few years, the Easter Saturday has become so important to me. That we we came out of Good Friday, and we know Easter is coming, Easter Sunday, where sometimes we are right in the middle of this, sitting in that maybe pain and confusion, unclarity. And it's right in there where God is challenging us to stay in that space until he has spoken. But this is going to be very hard sometimes. And I think I would be more into the flight or thinking of the people of Israel. They always wanted to, right? They wanted to go back to Egypt. They forgot the slavery part. They thought, oh, at least we know that there were some meat pots out there. I'm not sure if they got them, but sometimes we glorify the past because we don't know what's happening in the future. The Bible sadly doesn't use the word liminal space. I think what a shame, but it uses, something different. I was like, wow, what is out there? What is the Bible talking about? And so when I looked at the liminal space, it's not in the Bible, but in the Bible, it often mentions the word like the desert, a place where people experience God, sometimes in very lonely places. God is encountering people in the desert, in that time in between. And I brought you some examples here from the Bible. I was just thinking, of Moses. He was in that liminal space for 40 years. And he didn't hear from God, when is that 40 years ever going to be finished? He didn't hear the word 40. He just knew that he had to walk each day faithfully and leading his people onwards. And it was the same boring food. So, so much repetition probably in there. But he knew that he had to wait and he had to lead his people through the process. So there were lots of uncertainties in there, lots of challenges. But, God had spoken to Moses. Moses was clinging on to God's promise and saying, one day I'm going to lead you to the promised land. When and how, he really had to lead through the fog. And then I think of David, before he became a king, there were so many challenges. One of my favorite passages, had to fight the lion. Then he was, treated not bad, good by his brothers. He had to fight. He fought Goliath. There was his choice, but he was like, I'm going to defend God. He was a young boy, a teenager. And then, he was asked to be in the king's place and the king hated him. So how would David ever know one day, is he going to become the king or not? I'm sure he must have been doubting, something is happening, but will I ever leave that place? And so I thought one of the other things I was really struck by, looking at Moses, David, and others, I want to highlight something from Jeremiah, because that touched me very deeply over the last 2 years. Maybe also with some, war happening in Europe and other places. I was heartbroken by that, and it really touched me. It's from Jeremiah, not Isaiah, Jeremiah 32. And I thought it was so fascinating because God asked Jeremiah to buy a piece of land in the war zone. A piece of land in the war zone. I was just imagining, what if God is challenging me, saying, Evi, there's a plot of land in Afghanistan right now, and I want you to buy it. Because God had promised to the people of Israel that one day they will be again inhabiting Jerusalem. One day. They didn't know when and where, but God challenged Jeremiah and said, your cousin is going to come, and when he's wanting money, you're going to give the money to him and you buy that plot of land from him as a promise that one day I will be rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. What could have been worse, buying a plot of land in the war zone? Jeremiah was even in prison himself. So that was not a very good, lucky condition to do anything here, and he was pleading with God. And there were 3 responses by him, which I very much was challenged by. When I look at the prayer, of Jeremiah here, he said, God, I will remind you of your promises. I bought this plot of land, and this is stupidity when we think of that, from human terms. But God had challenged him to do that. And God, I'm reminding you of your promises to me. And you see, he was pleading with God to do it, and actually to rescue his city and rescue his people. So, that's a big thing. And then I thought the other thing, which I saw Jeremiah doing here, and I encourage you to read Jeremiah 32, that God appealed to God's character, that Jeremiah appealed to God's character. And he reminded God that God is a good God, that he's looking after his people, that he reminded God and saying, you are the God of the universe. You're the Almighty. You're the creator of the universe. So this situation is not impossible to you. And so he said, God, you've done it in the past. You are a good God. So I'm pleading with you to step in and do something. And he said, one day you will gather your people again, one day. And then the other thing is that Jeremiah trusted God's purpose. I mean, maybe this is, I think this is the big challenge when we are in foggy situations, to cling on to that and saying, God, we trust you that you actually have a good purpose. When I experienced, my situation, I wasn't shouting around saying hallelujah and amen, this is the best thing which could have happened to me, praise God. I was in tears and pain, but Jeremiah trusted God, saying, God, you will come through, this is your purpose. It is very absurd to do that, in a war zone, but I'm trusting you that you will come through in the end, that God will win. And that we can also, be encouraged to and trust God with his purposes for us, for our organizations, for our leadership. I mean, Jeremiah never saw the fulfillment of his prayers. He never saw it in his lifetime, but God still asked him to go ahead. And maybe this is a crazy question to you, what if God would ask you to do something really strange? I mean, like buying a plot of land in a war zone. What would be your response to God speaking or not? And would you say, this is so crazy, I will never do it? So the question is, can we trust God as he leads us into the fog and leads us through the fog? And so we encourage you now to go into breakout groups, and very happy for you, Nina, to take it away. And thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for setting us up so well, Evi, with that scripture, or that story from the Bible, because we would love for you guys to share with each other a Bible passage or scripture that has helped you to lead through challenging times. So maybe you're holding onto a promise right now. Maybe you've just gone through something like that, but I know that there's always a piece of scripture or a promise that we hold on to in these times. So a breakout room will pop up now. You can just click on joining, and you've got 10 minutes with 2 other leaders. And we really want to encourage you to show up by listening well and giving everyone a chance to introduce themselves and share what scripture have you held on to in times of leading through the fog. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good chat, and please share some of those scriptures that you've shared as examples. We can all stock up and on the bricks and the foundations for times of uncertainty. So if there's one person who might want to just share what you've spoken about, we would love to hear from you. We can give time for one person, then we'll jump into the rest of the presentation. Whoever's brave, you can unmute and tell us what scripture you held onto as you're leading through the fog.
I think I can share.
There we go.
This is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Wow.
Hi. We discussed with my group, and I think for me, I shared with them Psalm 23. Just knowing that the Lord is my shepherd, I will not want. I shall not want even through that fog. We were glad to just share some of the experiences and just questions coming in. For me in particular, what kind of fog I have gone through in my organization, which I was able to just respond. But what encourages me is that though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, and that valley is my fog. I don't see ahead. I can't see clearly. I don't see left, right, center. But the assurance that He is my shepherd, and He knows that I'm in that situation, just like what Evi was telling us, buying some land in Afghanistan right now. But God is the one who has sent you there. So that's my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. It takes really big faith to say, I shall not want in times of uncertainty. So that's a really strong one to hold on to. Right, Evi, ready when you are. You can start sharing screen again, and we'd love to hear from you. What is the character and the skills that we need to uphold, that the Lord is calling us to uphold in times of uncertainty? What you've learned.
Yeah, I will first go into some, fog possibilities, just to sort of get us on the same page here.
Yeah.
And I very much appreciate you sharing, Michael. And I just thought, selfishly, if you have, I'm sure Scripture has spoken to you in the past and in the foggy times, but if you wouldn't mind, putting them into the chat, that would really be very mean a lot to me. Just hearing from other experiences how God has spoken would be very appreciated. So whatever you've talked about, if you would be open to share that would be beautiful. So I want to just go with you through a bit of fogs. You maybe are entering at the moment or not. And I use a book as an orientation here. I already mentioned once, it is the book by Dan Allender, Leading with a Limp. And I really have fallen in love with that book. There are not too many books out there, sometimes for leaders leading through fog. And so I really was very challenged by his book and also by his story of how he's gone through uncertainty, failure, messing up, and also then reconciliation. So thank you if you're sharing it with me. And always happy to hear in the chat, your responses. And so this is us doing it together today. So let me mention some of the fog I see, and then very happy later to engage with you on these things. But when you do a Google research on major challenges for leaders, there are, probably about 10 to 20 things which always come up in conversations and in statistics, surveys, whatever we just had. And so let me just walk you through some of the, I want to mention 6 here quickly, and then sort of, go into what I think it takes from us to actually conquer this. And I'm a witness that God has met me in a whisper and has, spoken to me, and so that I can actually talk about this today. And I find that is such grace. So one of the situations we find ourselves in when we are in fog could be facing a crisis or crises. So there's a challenge up there that we have to lead through the fog, and we have to get through that. And sometimes some crises can be very internal. They can be inside us. When maybe I just realized that's maybe also very European, but so many people, Christians are now have theological questions. How do I reconcile my faith with what I was taught as a child? Or I'm not sure anymore, how do I navigate myself spiritually? What do I need? Or there could be other challenges, even maybe as women in leadership. There are challenges, questions I face sometimes in myself of how do I navigate as a CEO in various contexts. But so whatever crisis I could be in internally inside of me can, what we sometimes have this brain fog. It is very reasonable out there. It is something where I feel like the focus is very much on the problem. But then also I realize that there are crises which are out there which are also externally, where we try to lead and maneuver our organization through, and we try with all our best to maneuver through, and we're just failing. People are leaving the organization, there's maybe a turnover or whatever, but there are things we face, or even personally in our various family lives. I realized one of my sisters lost a child, and so how do we again deal with these issues, because they always affect the way we lead, right? So we cannot, compartmentalize and say leadership and life is very separate. No, lots of things are affecting our leadership. And then I also realized that maybe for some of, working maybe even in Christian ministries, I realized that it is far easier for me to actually work for God than with Him. I don't know if you've ever been to these places, but sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I am just there working for Him, and I have completely forgot to actually integrate Him and ask Him what He wants from me, because I'm so driven by the things. So there could be various things which could cause you a crisis. Then also the next one which ties in with what Niels mentioned at the start. The VUCA world is very, very complex. Our world has become crazily complex. There's so many challenges also coming out of COVID. How do we deal, with situations like what we're facing today? So even there could be, as leaders, we maybe face competitive values, challenges and perspectives. Maybe we have to decide, what is more important. There are two bad options sometimes. Which one is the worst? We need to decide, and sometimes it's very hard to make decisions that maybe you have to prioritize. One is more complex than the other. Which one do you choose? Is one more important than the other? What if your ministry or organization grows very fast, and then you have that complex situation as well? Do I need to hire some more? I mean, will this growth last? How do we prepare for it? But also then, what does it mean for us as we think some of our work on organization might shrink in a minute? And so it can be very colorful, very diverse, and constantly we have to make new decisions. So what is, if your church, whatever, is losing members like crazy, what decisions to be taken? And then the third one, which is, I think lots of you will agree on this, is the exhaustion. Exhaustion we face in leadership. And at the moment, maybe this sounds very bad, but I came to realize maybe when you see people back in leadership after 5 or 10 years, I feel like the whole face is telling, the pressure, the burden of being in leadership. So sometimes I say very German-like, too direct maybe, but I say, leaders, I think, have a faster expiry date than others. That is not like, comparing you to a yogurt, but, sometimes I think like, oh my goodness, there is something there which is actually showing that you bear the price in leadership, and can be very hard. And sometimes also I realize that sometimes I become the Messiah myself. I develop this Messiah complex. The more I work, the more I get done, and then the more exhausted I am, but I can't keep my Sabbath because I have to go striving. So I go and become very exhausted. Then the other thing which Dan Allender mentions and also listed on some of the top things is conflict. Of course, that conflict is very, very hard to endure, and then which decision to make or not. Today I was just dealing with another organization who have no structure, no culture in place to actually handle conflict. So then everything is pushed to the side and everyone's just nice, but behind the back, it's not working out. But so because we haven't learned how to address also conflict and what we face maybe with our own teams or stakeholders. And then Allender, in his book, he says that conflict can also become like betrayal. So experiencing that someone maybe on your team, he even goes so far and says, that the fog could also mean that someone on your team, your personal friends or colleagues will betray you. And this is one of the reasons he says that so many leaders drop out of it, because they just can't bear whatever tension may from the outside, but not that internal among you. And that also leads then to another point, to the loneliness. What is out there? I mean, this is what I love, that Mergen and, offers these courses, because it's exactly that space of having like-minded people to meet, and hopefully there's a safe space where we can share our stories. And loneliness is very real. Leaders were interviewed on their friendships through life, and actually they found out that most leaders do not have lifelong friends. Sometimes it's very hard, because then maybe you start off as friends, one of you becomes better, and then maybe someone envies you the stage and thinks like, oh no, she has overtaken you, he has overtaken me, and I'm getting jealous or envy or whatever, and then the friendships really quit on that. So as leaders, how do we deal with this? And also realizing that sometimes it's also the price tag that sometimes we miss on family parties and whatever, because we are so focused. And I remember I was interviewing the Evangelical Alliance leader in Wales in the UK, and I asked him about dealing with loneliness, and he says that every leader carries a kind of loneliness in him. Doesn't have to be big and vast, but he says like everyone is carrying one kind of loneliness in us, because we as leaders, we try to go ahead so that other people can follow us one step. And so that somehow that is felt as a separation. And also the question is, am I willing to bear this kind of fog, even sometimes just, for the sake of God and the kingdom? And the last one, which we already touched a bit, is that facing the change and uncertainties. And when I think, Neil, that was so profound when you gave us that statistic, that only 18% of leaders are actually able, that what was it? They didn't have the what
skills.
are you saying?
Yes.
They didn't have the
not able to. That's right.
Yeah. So that was, I thought, I didn't know about the statistic today, but which we were using, but I thought, like, how do we enable our leaders in that sense of leading through these uncertainties? Because it can be that our vision is obscured and we have to, maybe clean our glasses, but it is adapting to circumstances, like what is driving innovation forward in your organization, or you have to manage resistance from team members who hate change, And so how does it make you feel? Even the change in that, what we talk about, the limited space, what is out there? So let me go into some of my personal maybe learnings. I'm very happy then also to hear from you what I think it does take from us. And I'm not there. As Nina said at the start, I feel like I'm right in the middle of another foggy situation. I'm organizing a global conference and it feels very foggy and scary, but it's in there again that I want to hear God whisper. And why am I mentioning that whispering of God? Because I think often God doesn't speak in a very loud voice. If you have heard him in a loud voice, I'm very grateful. But often he speaks in a whisper, like he did to Elijah. When Elijah was facing his huge battle, and so what does it mean to trust God in that situation when he wanted to just die? He had this huge success and he just thought, this is it. I'm just going to die. And then God appeared to him and whispered to him. So God is also maybe asking us again today to trust him and saying, actually, whatever it takes, that we stay and cling onto him. So even in my crisis I was in, I said, God, I will trust you no matter what. And we have to make that decision before we enter the fog the next time. That we really say, God, whatever it takes, I will keep clinging onto you, trusting you. And we have all experienced, he will not let me drown. Just as Michael was saying, Psalm 23, he will not let me drown. He will be right there with me in the dark valley. And I remember a mission psychologist I was able to afterwards, see in my crisis. She said, you cannot hear God right now. And I was like, what? What? Why not? Why not? But she said, because everything is so noisy around you. You cannot even trust God now because everything is so noisy. She said, like, when was the last time you've had good sleep? When did you do something to relax? How about your Sabbath? When have you done sports? When have you read the Bible and engaged with God properly and not just in passing? And so we need to have these steps also in place to be able to listen and hear God speak and be able to trust him. And it's a daily decision that we have to make as leaders, that we say, no matter how foggy the situation is, can we cling on to him and saying, God, I will trust in you. I will trust. And then as leaders, I think it's very important that we lead by vision. What is the vision you have? Thinking of Jeremiah again, in that prison, he had the vision that God is going to come one day and rescue his people. God had promised, and so again, Jeremiah trusted God's promise. And so can we have the vision God has given to us as organization leaders, church leaders, and whatever, can we lead by that vision of trusting God and clearly communicate that we have experienced God's goodness before. He's done it before. So he will again, as a team, can we say we trust him together to lead us through these wobbly times? What does it take for us? Maybe, the Bible says very clearly, without a vision, people perish. And so what is the vision? What is guiding you forward and saying, we are risking, we're taking next steps because we have this vision in front of us. And then the other thing, which I think is so important, is managing yourself. Probably all of you have heard of Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker said, the only person you can really lead is yourself. That's the only person you can really lead is yourself. And so how do we manage ourselves? And so I've become a nuisance to pastors and leaders, because one of my often, second question is, after how are you doing, whatever, I said, are you keeping your Sabbath? I don't care when the Sabbath is in your week, because some of us work, whenever, weekends and so on. But are we having this healthy rhythm that do we know what takes my energy and what drains me? Do we know this about ourselves? Can we manage also our fears, our temper, our behavior, our time? How will I lead myself also through that fog? And there is another thing I think is needed for us as leaders, that we are willing to make detours and turnarounds. This is probably something we don't like doing. Sometimes it's embarrassing. Sometimes it's humbling also, that you have to go and apologize, maybe say, we did a detour, but can we celebrate also our failures in there and saying we're willing to get up again? And I brought you my favorite picture, and this is so not German, but I love it, because I think God is a God of detours. When I have not listened to him well and was disobedient, he actually can use that dent, whatever, in my street, in my whatever, metaphorically, he's right there, and he can use my detours to correct me and, get back on the same path. And then the last one is, that as a leader, we have to make decisions. We have to make sometimes risky decisions. But you as a leader, you have no option than to make decisions. And sometimes they might be, bad to bad, but, you have to make decisions. So I applaud everyone who's willing and saying, I'm risking it, with good conscience and praying in God's wisdom, I will make decisions. It can be very hard to navigate through the fog. And especially when you know that the outcome will be hard, will be tough on some people, but to make decisions. And we as leaders, we cannot afford that we neglect making decisions, or that we're delegating them, because, sometimes I want to chicken out of the situation. I want to give it to someone else, let him be the scapegoat. But I think it takes us as leaders to say, we are willing to be out there. And the last question I want to have with us here before we go into groups, I want to leave that question with you from Exodus 4:2. Moses was asked by God, what is in your hands? And you might remember the story. Moses always had a staff, and sometimes he was doing stupid things with the staff. He shouldn't, touch the rock, and he touched the rock. But God he's equipped you with everything you need to lead through the fog. He has equipped you. He has skilled you. So what is it that God is asking you today to think through? What is in your hands? What has God placed in your hands which actually helps you to navigate through the fog? And can you then trust his leading? Thank you, Nina.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Evi. We have a second breakout room question coming up. The question is, drum roll. What is one principle? I'll post it in the chat. What is one principle or value or strategy which has helped you to not give up? And what fog are you facing right now? So you might have touched on some of that in the previous conversation, to share some of the fog that you're sharing, with the scripture. But if you are willing to go into a bit more detail and just unpack what fog are you experiencing right now, with the purpose of praying for each other. And my prayer for you is really that you would experience some sort of clarity, not certainty, but clarity of what God has placed in your hands for you to lead through this fog, because he has equipped you to lead in this time. So Right, the breakout room question, the breakout room will come up again now. You have another 10 minutes. So please share with each other principles, strategies that has helped you lead through the fog, and pray for each other. Welcome back, everybody. I trust that was good and encouraging. And I'm very curious to head into this time of questions and answers, and just all of you sharing some of what you've shared now with the people in your breakout room, if you're willing to. So we've just discussed principles, more practical examples of what has helped each of us to lead through the fog. And also, if you were keen to share a bit more and pray for each other, I hope that was valuable for you. But as we head into this question and answers time, I really want to encourage you to post questions in the chat or write them down. We have a few minutes for that. This is your time to get practical and be equipped before you leave the call. So I have one question that I'll kick off with, and I'll pitch it to both Evi and Neil. I would love to hear from both of you, your perspectives. What are some practical tools that you have used to get out of this liminal space without short-circuiting it? So that space is really valuable, and it's a time to grow, but it's also not the space where we need to be forever. So yeah, if you've got any tools that you found really valuable, and maybe if you can loop in, how do you know when it's the right time to get out of the space, or when it's good to still stay in that space a little bit longer?
And let the expert Neil take it.
Well, we'll come back to you very shortly. That's a great question. Because I think, all leaders are going to find themselves in the things that Evi's spoken about: crisis, complexity, conflict. These are things that no leader is going to be exempt from. There's this thing of the liminal space, which is often the gift in the crisis, which is when God, has us in this place of uncertainty. If we jump out of that too quickly, we sometimes miss the gift of God. And so, I think a big part of the leaders processing and working it through is knowing how long to stay in liminal space and how quickly to move out of it, because not everybody can cope in that liminal space, but often there's a gift in the liminal space for us to find. And so, what I would normally do if there's crisis or there's complexity, I have a sort of a process that I go through. The first sort of process is input, and there, you want to ask people for wisdom, because you're in a crisis because you lack wisdom, right? You just don't know what to do. It's foggy. And so after getting input, I then move from the many input into the one, which is just me, me on my own with God, thinking. I'm the kind of leader, I like to spend time thinking with God. But I like to do that after I've got input. And then from there, I really can clarify my own thinking, write it down. And then the third piece for me is soundboarding. Soundboarding is not the many. Soundboarding is 2 or 3 people who I trust with wisdom. So I'll go for input. I'll go into time of spending time on my own, and I'll go into time of soundboarding. So that's kind of often what works for me. And the liminal space for me is when I'm on my own. It's just kind of wrestling through that. So that's what I find works with crisis, with complexity, those kinds of things. Conflict, I think, is slightly different, and I'll just touch on that briefly. Conflict for me, the thing that I normally have to do, because when a leader's in conflict, it's personal. It's very often personal. And the first thing I've learned to do in conflict is walk out of that and ask God one question: is who do you say I am? Because conflict is the type of thing that often comes at your identity as a leader. I'm not good enough. I missed it, all those kinds of things. And so going to God and saying, God, just remind me again, who do you say I am? And then being able to walk out of conflict with a certain peace in your heart around your identity, so that you can lovingly work on the conflict that's at hand.
Wow, this is great, Neil. Some of it resonates with me. Very practically, because I was not very good in taking care of myself. So that self-leading part, I realized that after my crisis that I sort of I bought myself a sport watch, and I walk every day. So when you think, you were more a thinker, I had turned into a walker with God. So I try to be outside, I mean, every day, and just try and go for a walk and just see what is, experiencing nature, smelling something, and so just it's beautiful for my heart. The other thing is I put also Sabbath into my diary. So I had to, because it is often my time is taken away, I have to put it into my calendar. So that's also going to be very important. And I think mentor. Having a mentor walking with me. I mean, and I need to find a mentor before I am in the next fog. So this has been life-saving for me. I all my life, I would say, to the mentor I had and have, a wonderful British man. And also then I think another thing which resonated with me here, Neil, is I have some resolutions in place. I call them resolutions, something which I'm driven by, my principles. And so just to maybe mention two. One is I will never make a decision when I'm down. Or even after an event or something, when I'm at my worst place, I will make the worst decision. So I need to sleep through things, and just wait. And so that kind of, being in that living space and not making decisions just on the spot if there are life-changing elements in there. And then the other one is which I'm very driven by since I'm 17 or so. Someone mentioned that, and it really struck me as I will never say no because of fear. So that also helps me as a resolution. Say there are many situations, as even if it's a woman in leadership, maybe that for me has been an issue in Europe. I will never say no and skip out of things just because I'm scared.
Love that. That's so good. Leaders making a resolution so that when you get to the crisis, you fall back on the decisions that you've made in the good time to help you in the bad time. Really good.
Yeah, I really love that. Thank you, Neil and Evi. And it's good. It's a good note to take. If you're not in so much fog at the moment, write down those scriptures, write down the resolutions, get the mentor, equip yourself well, and make yourself more resilient for those moments. We have 2 questions in the chat, and if you guys have questions that you still want to ask, do post it. We'll keep it going on the WhatsApp group. Don't worry about the time. We will be starting to wrap it up soon, but for the time being, I'll just pose this one from Letitia. When I experience fog, I keep reminding myself of the characteristics of God. Oh, it's a state. Oh, thank you. This is very encouraging. Thanks, Letitia. Of God, and deliberately remind myself of that. Yeah, I think that's the only thing that we can really confidently stand on, and the fact that God's character is unchanging. And we've spoken about this, Neil, even I, in the previous breakout room, is that the norm that we see in the Bible of other leaders is leading in uncertainty. And all of the examples show that God has always been faithful. So that is true today as well, equally as true as it was years ago. And then just quickly from Bates, he says, when I'm in the fog, it sometimes feels more like a desert and that I'm distant from the presence of God. What is the one good step to take to know the closeness of God again in the fog?
A good question for Evi, that one.
Thank you, sir. Yes, delegation. Yeah. I mean, personally, I just it is. I think first for me, it's super important to acknowledge. For me, it's not. I mean, for me to come to a kind of acceptance that actually I'm in that status right now. That I actually realize the situation I'm in. So it is coming not to accept the circumstances, but actually saying I'm acknowledging them, because often I push things away and I think like this is not true of today, whatever. So. And then also I realized that I am very much an emotional person, so I wait for the right feelings. But I often think the feelings don't come; they will come after I have taken decisions. So I try not to rely on my feelings or feeling if God is near or not. I speak it out loud and saying, God, you're right here in the middle of it. And though I might not feel you right now, I know you're there, and that really helps me. And then I think He surprises us. He surprises me with a verse in the Bible. He surprises me with an encounter, randomly somewhere. So I watch for these small whispers.
Can I add to that quickly? That's such a good point of being in the reality. One of the most difficult things for leaders is to be disconnected from reality. And when a lot of things get thrown at us, it's very easy to actually disconnect. You check out, you go numb, all those kinds of things. So connecting into the reality is a very hard thing. And I think that's why we need good voices around us, mentors or people that we can trust. So the two things that come up for me, the one is push yourself into the reality so you can read the situation well. And the second thing is push yourself into your heavenly reality. And I always think about Colossians 3, which is such a good place. It says, since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven. So we have two realities that we walk in. And we have to be able to walk in those two realities simultaneously, but make sure we're not in the pseudo reality of disconnected feelings, because sometimes you can stay in that and that's not reality. So you got to push yourself into the reality of the situation, push yourself into the reality of heaven. And I think that, Bates, is probably part of the secret of connecting back into God.
Sure. Amazing. Thank you so much, Neil. And Evi, it's been wonderful to connect with you and also lean into the more practical side. So everyone, thank you for being here. Please don't jump off. We would love to get your feedback. We've all learned together from Evi and from Neil, and we would now appreciate it if we can learn from you how we can make these sessions better and whether you find it helpful. So a poll will be coming up. And if you have a look there, 10 is that you will recommend it. 1 is that you wouldn't want to recommend it. So it's from 10 to 1, and you'll have to scroll a little bit because there's 4 questions. So sometimes people miss the last, but we would like to hear from you for all of the questions. And let me just jump to the next slide. We have upcoming events that we would love for you to join. I really enjoy seeing everyone recurringly participate in these conversations. So we've got Shirley Therese talking about creating an inspiring work environment, and Pat McMillan is going to be talking about governance in September. And if you want to keep the learning going, the related course is Leading Through the Fog on our platform. And there's been a lot of tools and tips and scriptures and really helpful things being shared in this session. So I'll repost all of that on the WhatsApp group. If you want to scan this QR code, you can be part of the group. You can also share the link with others if you think they would find it valuable. So stay with us and join us on the group. We'd love to continue the engagement with you. And that is it, everyone. It is lovely to have you here. You can continue to also connect with me at nina@54collective.com if you have any questions, any recommendations, or if you just want to say hi, you're welcome to. And we also have assessments, courses. This is an example of live learning and the WhatsApp community that are ways for you to engage with 54. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks again, Evi, for taking the time. You've got a lot on your plate, but it's great to connect in the fog.
Thank you.
Please
Thanks,
join
Neil.
us, everybody, in wishing Evi all the best. She's leading a very big conference at Lausanne. So Evi, all the very best. I'll be there with you in Korea, but it's going to be an absolute joy, and we know that you're carrying a lot on your plate. So go for it.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks for joining.